must complete the ritual. In that moment of terror and confusion, a memory surfaced. The vision I'd had when I first touched the box. The hooded figures, the chanting. Without thinking, I began to repeat the words I'd heard, a language I didn't understand pouring from my lips. The orb flared brightly, expanding to fill the room. I felt myself being lifted off the ground, suspended in the pulsing energy. The chant grew louder, my voice joining with the thousands of others, and then, suddenly, silence. I found myself standing in the middle of my destroyed living room, the box lying open and empty at my feet. The orb was gone, but I could feel its energy thrumming through my veins. I knew, with a certainty that terrified me, that I had changed, that the world had changed. A knock at the door made me jump. I approached cautiously, peering through the peephole. A group of people stood in the hallway, dressed in dark robes. The one in front smiled, and I recognized him as the delivery man from earlier. "Well done, Sarah," he said, though the door was still closed. "Or should I say, vessel of the ancients? It's time to fulfill your true purpose." I stood there frozen as the reality of my situation sunk in. I wasn't Sarah Mitchell. I had never been Sarah Mitchell. But I had opened the box. I had spoken the words. And now, for better or worse, I had become her. As I opened the door to face my new destiny, one thought echoed in my mind. Never, ever open a package that isn't addressed to you. You never know what kind of Pandora's box you might be unleashing. The robed figures entered my apartment, their faces a mix of reverence and anticipation. The leader approached me, holding out a hand. "Come," he said, "there's much to be done." I took his hand, feeling the last vestiges of my old life slip away. Whatever lay ahead, whatever cosmic game I unwittingly became a part of, there was no going back now. The package had been delivered, the ritual completed, and I, the accidental chosen one, was about to step into a world I never knew existed. As we left my apartment, my old life behind, I couldn't help but wonder, how many other Sarah Mitchells were out there, receiving packages not meant for them, unleashing forces they couldn't comprehend, and how many of them, like me, would be forever changed by a simple act of misplaced curiosity. The door closed behind us with a final ominous click. My journey as the vessel of the ancients had begun, all because of a package that should never have been mine. The "Welcome to Millbrook" sign flashed by in an instant, faded paint peeling off weathered wood. I blinked, certain I had imagined it. We'd been driving for hours on this deserted highway, and this was the first sign of civilization we'd seen. "Did you see that?" I asked, turning to my friends in the back seat. Jake, his nose buried in his phone, grunted non-committally. Sarah, our designated navigator, frowned at the map spread across her lap. "Millbrook? That's not on here," she muttered, tracing our route with her finger. I slowed the car, an uneasy feeling settling in my stomach. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, casting long shadows across the empty road. "Maybe we should turn back," I suggested, my knuckles whitening on the steering wheel. That's when we saw it, a town, seemingly materializing out of the twilight haze. Quaint houses lined quiet streets, their windows dark and uninviting. A lone streetlight flickered at an intersection, casting an eerie glow over the deserted main street. "Well, this is charming," Jake said, finally looking up from his phone. The sarcasm in his voice couldn't quite mask the nervousness underneath. I pulled up to a stop sign, peering down the empty streets. Something felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on what. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the idle of our engine. "Let's just pass through," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Find the highway on the other side." I nodded, pressing gently on the gas. We crawled through the town, our headlights illuminating abandoned storefronts and overgrown lawns. It was as if the entire population had simply vanished. We were halfway through town when our engine sputtered and died. "No, no, no," I muttered, turning the key frantically. The engine whined, but refused to start. "Guys!" Jake's voice was tense. "Look!" I followed his gaze and felt my blood run cold. Figures were emerging from the shadows, their movements slow and deliberate. They converged on our car from all directions, their faces hidden in the growing darkness. "Lock the doors!" Sarah yelled, but I was already fumbling with the controls. The click of the locks engaging seemed impossibly loud in the quiet night. We sat there, hearts pounding as the figures drew closer. I could make out their features now, blank expressions, eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light. A tap on my window made me jump. An old woman stood there, her face inches from the glass. Her mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear against my better judgment. I cracked the window just an inch. "Can you help us?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Our car broke down." The old woman's face split into a grin, revealing teeth that were just a bit too sharp. "Oh, we can help you," she said, her voice raspy and cold. "We've been waiting for you." A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean, waiting for us?" Her grin widened. "It's been so long since we've had visitors, so long since we've been able to feed." I slammed the window shut, my heart racing. "We need to get out of here now." Jake was already trying the back doors, but they wouldn't budge. "They're jammed," he yelled, panic evident in his voice. The figures were pressed against the car now, their hands leaving smears on the windows. I could hear a low chanting, the words indistinguishable, but filled with malice. Sarah let out a strangled cry. "The windows! Look at the windows!" I watched in horror as the glass began to fog, intricate patterns of frost spreading across the surface. The temperature inside the car plummeted, our breath coming out in visible puffs. "What's happening?" Jake's voice was high with fear. I didn't have an answer. I turned the key again, praying for the engine to start. It coughed once, twice, and then roared to life. "Hold on," I yelled, slamming the car in drive. We lurched forward, the figures scattering before us. I didn't slow down, didn't look back, just pressed the gas pedal to the floor and drove. The town streets seemed to shift and change as we sped through them, familiar landmarks appearing in impossible places. Every turn led us back to the center of town, the old woman's cackling laughter echoing in our ears. "We can't get out," Sarah sobbed from the back seat. "They won't let us leave." I gritted my teeth, determination replacing fear. Yes, we can. We have to. I made a hard right, tires squealing on the pavement. There, at the end of the street, was the "Welcome to Millbrook" sign, our way out. The engine whined as I pushed it to its limits. The sign grew larger in our windshield. 50 feet, 25 feet, 10 feet. Suddenly, a wall of townspeople materialized before us, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. I hesitated for a split second, then pressed the gas harder. "Hold on!" I screamed as we plowed into the crowd. There was a sickening thud, and then we're through. The "Welcome to Millbrook" sign disappeared in our rearview mirror, along with the nightmare town we drove, in silence for miles, the adrenaline slowly fading, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. It wasn't until the first rays of dawn peeked over the horizon that I finally felt safe enough to pull over. We sat there on the side of the highway, trying to process what had happened. Our car was dented and scratched, evidence that the night's events weren't just a shared hallucination. What were they?" Sarah finally asked, her voice hoarse. I shook my head. "I don't know, and I don't want to know." Jake, who had been unusually quiet, spoke up. Guys, look at this. He held up his phone, showing us a web search he'd managed to do once we'd gotten back in range. The headline made my blood run cold. Millbrook, the town that disappeared. The article went on to describe how 50 years ago the entire population of Millbrook had vanished overnight. Searches had turned up nothing. The town had been abandoned, left to rot. "But we were just there," Sarah whispered. "We saw them." I started the car, my hands shaking slightly. "Let's get out of here. I don't ever want to take a shortcut again." As we pulled back onto the highway, I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd escaped something ancient and hungry, something that would be waiting for the next unsuspecting travelers to stumble into its trap. I pressed the gas pedal harder, eager to put as much distance between us and Millbrook as possible. But even as the miles ticked by, I couldn't escape the memory of those glowing eyes, or the old woman's words echoing in my mind. "We've been waiting for you." I shuddered, knowing that somewhere behind us, in a town that shouldn't exist, they were still waiting. And I prayed that no one else would ever take that fatal wrong turn into Millbrook. The air in the lab felt different that night, thicker somehow, charged with an energy that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I'd been working late, as usual, poring over data from our latest experiments. But something wasn't right. The numbers didn't add up, and the silence in the normally bustling research facility was deafening. I stretched my back, cracking after hours hunched over my computer. That's when I noticed it. A faint blue glow emanating from beneath the door of Dr. Erickson's office. Odd. He'd left hours ago, along with the rest of the staff. Curiosity got the better of me. I approached the door, my footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. As I got closer, I could hear a low hum, barely audible, but unmistakably there. My hand hesitated on the doorknob. I knew I shouldn't be snooping, but something compelled me forward. The door creaked open, and I gasped. Dr. Erickson's usually immaculate office was in disarray. Papers were strewn everywhere, and strange symbols were scrawled across his whiteboards. But what caught my eye was the source of the blue glow, a small device on his desk, pulsing with an otherworldly light. I stepped closer, transfixed. The device looked like nothing I'd ever seen before. It was roughly the size of a softball, covered in intricate etchings that seemed to shift and change as I watched. The humming grew louder as I approached, and I could feel a strange vibration in the air. Without thinking, I reached out to touch it. The moment my fingers made contact, a jolt of electricity shot through my body. Images flashed before my eyes, strange landscapes, bizarre creatures, advanced technology beyond my wildest imagination. And then darkness. I came to on the floor, my head throbbing. How long had I been out? I checked my watch and felt my stomach drop. 3 hours had passed, but it felt like only seconds. Scrambling to my feet, I looked around wildly. The device was gone. In its place was a note written in Dr. Erickson's messy scrawl. "If you're reading this, I'm sorry. You were never supposed to see this. Run, before they find you too." My mind raced. Who were all they? What had I stumbled into? I didn't have time to ponder these questions. A noise from the hallway made me freeze. Footsteps, heavy and purposeful, were approaching. I ducked behind Dr. Erickson's desk, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure it would give me away. The door opened, and 2 men entered. Their voices were low, but I could make out snippets of their conversation. "Compromised. We need to contain this. What about the girl, the new researcher? She knows too much. Take care of it." I clapped a hand over my mouth to stifle a gasp. They were talking about me. I had to get out of there. As quietly as I could, I crawled towards the window. It was a long drop to the ground, but I didn't have a choice. Just as I was about to make my move, a hand clamped down on my shoulder. I spun around, coming face to face with one of the men. His eyes were cold, devoid of any emotion. "Going somewhere?" he asked, his voice chillingly calm. I reacted on instinct, driving my elbow into his solar plexus. He grunted, his grip loosening just enough for me to break free. I bolted for the door, adrenaline coursing through my veins. The hallway was a blur as I ran, alarms blaring in my wake. I could hear shouts behind me, footsteps giving chase. I took random turns, hoping to lose them in the maze-like layout of the facility.
I burst through a set of double doors and found myself in the main laboratory. Rows of experiments lined the walls, each more bizarre than the last. But I didn't have time to contemplate the strangeness of it all. I needed a way out. That's when I saw it. In the corner of the lab, partially hidden behind a large piece of equipment, was a door I'd never noticed before. It was unmarked, with no visible handle or lock, but as I approached, it slid open silently. Without thinking, I dashed through. The door closed behind me with a soft hiss, plunging me into darkness. For a moment, panic threatened to overwhelm me. Then, lights flickered on, revealing a long, sterile corridor that seemed to stretch on forever. I started walking, then running. The corridor seemed endless, with no turns or doors in sight. Just as I was about to begin to think I'd made a terrible mistake, I saw something ahead. Another door, this one glowing with the same eerie blue light as the device in Dr. Erickson's office. I reached for the handle, my hand trembling. As my fingers touched the cool metal, that same jolt of electricity coursed through me. More visions flashed before my eyes, but this time, I understood them. They weren't just random images, but information, knowledge about things beyond our world, beyond our understanding of science and reality. The door swung open, revealing not another room or hallway, but a swirling vortex of energy. I stood on the threshold, my mind reeling from the influx of information and the impossible sight before me. I knew with a certainty that terrified me that stepping through that portal would change everything. I would never be able to return to my old life, my old understanding of the world. But staying meant capture, possibly worse. The sound of approaching footsteps made the decision for me. I took a deep breath and stepped into the unknown. The sensation was indescribable. It felt like I was being torn apart and put back together, molecule by molecule. Colors I had no names for swirled around me. Equations and formulas danced across my vision, explaining the very fabric of the universe. And then suddenly, it was over. I found myself standing in a vast chamber, unlike anything I'd ever seen. The walls were made of a material that seemed to shift and change, sometimes solid, sometimes translucent. Strange machines hummed and pulsed, their purpose beyond my comprehension. "Welcome, Dr. Levine," a voice said behind me. I spun around to see Dr. Erickson.
Erickson, standing there. But he looked different. Older, yet somehow more vital. His eyes held a wisdom and sadness that hadn't been there before. Before what? "What is this place?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "What's happening?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "This, my dear, is where we truly push the boundaries of science, where we explore realities beyond our own." As he spoke, more people entered the chamber. Some looked human, others decidedly not. They all regarded me with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "You weren't supposed to find out about this," Dr. Erickson continued. "Not yet. But now that you're here, you have a choice to make." He gestured to a device on a nearby pedestal. It looked like a more advanced version of the one I'd touched in his office. "You can go back. We'll wipe your memory, and you can return to your old life. Or, I prompted, my heart racing. "Or you can stay, join us, help us unlock the secrets of the multiverse. But know this, if you choose to stay, there's no going back. Your old life, everyone you've ever known or loved, will be lost to you forever." I stood there, my mind reeling. Part of me wanted to run back through that portal, to forget everything I'd seen and return to the comfortable ignorance of my former life. But a larger part, the part that had always pushed me to question, to explore, to seek out the unknown, knew there was only one real choice. I took a deep breath and stepped toward the device. "Where do we start?" Dr. Erickson's face broke into a genuine smile this time. "Welcome to the team, Dr. Levine. We have so much to show you." As the others gathered around, eager to begin my initiation into this new world of endless possibilities, I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and in terror. I had no idea what lay ahead, what wonders or horrors I might encounter. But I knew one thing for certain: my life would never be the same again. And as I gazed out at the shifting walls of the chamber, catching glimpses of other worlds, other realities, I realized that my journey into the unknown had only just begun. The old Victorian bed and breakfast loomed before me, its weathered facade a stark contrast to the quaint charm promised by the brochure. As I lugged my suitcase up the creaking steps, a chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the autumn breeze. Something about this place felt off. I booked a weekend stay on a whim, desperate for a break from my hectic city life. The Willow Creek Inn had seemed perfect, secluded, historic, and supposedly home to the best blueberry pancakes in the state. But standing there, key in hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd made a terrible mistake. The door swung open before I could insert the key, revealing a petite woman with silver hair and piercing blue eyes. Her smile was warm, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Welcome to Willow Creek Inn," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "You must be Emily. We've been expecting you." I forced a smile, trying to ignore the unease growing in my stomach. "That's me. Thanks for having me." She ushered me inside, chattering about the inn's history and amenities, but I was only half listening, my attention caught by the strange symbols carved into the wooden banister. They looked ancient, almost runic. "Your room is on the 3rd floor," the innkeeper who introduced herself as Mrs. Holloway said, snapping me back to the present. "Last door on the right. Dinner is at 7 in the main dining room. Don't be late." There was something in her tone, a hint of threat. I shook my head, chiding myself for being paranoid. I was here to relax, not invent mysteries where there were none. As I climbed the stairs, I couldn't help but notice how quiet the inn was. Weren't there supposed to be other guests? The brochure had mentioned the place being fully booked this time of year. My room was small, but cozy, with floral wallpaper and a 4-poster bed that looked like it belonged in a museum. I unpacked quickly, eager to explore the grounds before dinner. The gardens behind the inn were beautiful, a riot of autumnal colors. But as I wandered deeper into the property, I noticed something strange. Hidden among the trees and bushes were small stone statues, their features worn smooth by time. They all seemed to be facing the inn, their blank eyes somehow accusing. A twig snapped behind me, and I whirled around. A man stood there, tall and lean, with a gardener's apron tied around his waist. His smile was friendly, but there was something unsettling about his eyes. "Enjoying the gardens, miss?" he asked, his voice grassly. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "They're lovely. Those statues are interesting." His smile faltered for a moment. Yes, family heirlooms. Those, best not to pay them too much mind." Before I could ask what he meant, the dinner bell rang. The gardener's smile returned, too wide and too bright. "Best hurry along now. Mrs. Holloway doesn't like to be kept waiting." I made my way back to the inn, my mind whirling with questions. As I entered the dining room, I was surprised to see other guests already seated. There were 5 of them, all middle-aged or older, all watching me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. Mrs. Holloway appeared at my elbow, guiding me to an empty seat. "So glad you could join us, Emily. We were just about to begin." The meal was delicious, but I barely tasted it. The conversation around the table was stilted and odd, full of inside jokes and meaningful glances that excluded me. And every time I tried to ask a question about the inn or the other guests, the subject was quickly changed. As dessert was served, a blood-red sorbet that Mrs. Holloway insisted was her special recipe, I noticed the other guests watching me expectantly. The room seemed to hold its breath as I took my first bite. The flavor exploded on my tongue, unlike anything I'd ever tasted before. It was delicious, but there was an underlying bitterness that made me uneasy. As I swallowed,
A wave of dizziness washed over me. "Are you all right, dear?" Mrs. Holloway asked, her voice sounding distant and distorted. Perhaps you should lie down." I tried to stand, but my legs felt like lead. The room spun around me, the faces of the other guests blurring into grotesque masks. The last thing I saw before darkness claimed me was Mrs. Holloway's smile, no longer warm, but predatory. I woke with a start, my head pounding. I was back in my room, though I had no memory of how I'd gotten there. The clock on the bedside table read 3:33 a.m. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I realized with a jolt that I wasn't alone. Shadowy figures stood around my bed, their features indistinct in the gloom. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I was paralyzed, unable to move or speak. As the shadows advanced, their forms shifting and writhing in impossible ways, I pressed myself against the wall, desperately searching for a way out. That's when I saw it, a small trapdoor in the ceiling, almost hidden by the room's ornate molding. Without thinking, I grabbed the desk chair and climbed up, pushing at the trapdoor with all my strength. It gave way with a groan, and I pulled myself up into a dark, musty attic space. I could hear the shadows below, their whispers growing angry and insistent. I crawled through the darkness, cobwebs clinging to my face and arms, until I found another trapdoor. This one opened into a hallway I didn't recognize. The inn seemed to have transformed in the night. The hallways were narrower and darker,
Twisted and turned in ways that defied logic, and the paintings on the walls seemed to watch me as I ran past. I could hear chanting now, coming from somewhere deep within the building. I turned a corner and found myself at the top of the main staircase. The front door was just below, my chance at escape, but as I started down the steps, I saw them. Miss Holloway, the gardener, and the other guests standing in a circle in the foyer. They were wearing robes now, deep crimson with those strange symbols embroidered in gold. Mrs. Holloway looked up, her eyes meeting mine. The kindly innkeeper was gone, replaced by something ancient and hungry. "There you are, my dear," she said, her voice resonating with power. "We've been waiting for you. It's time to take your place in the circle." I turned to run back up the stairs, but the shadows were there, blocking my path. I was trapped. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice shaking. "What do you want from me?" The gardener stepped forward, his face twisted into a cruel smile. "We need new blood, fresh energy to keep our little arrangement going. And you, my dear, are perfect." As they closed in around me, I realized with horror that the symbols on their robes were moving, slithering across the fabric like living things. The chanting grew louder, and I could feel a pressure building in the air, like the moment before a thunderstorm. In desperation, I lashed out, pushing past Mrs. Holloway and making a break for the door. But as my hand closed around the knob, a searing pain shot through my arm. I looked down to see one of those symbols burning itself into my skin. The door swung open, but instead of the gardens and the road beyond, there was only swirling darkness. I stood on the threshold, the chanting reaching a pitch peak behind me, the darkness beckoning before me. In that moment, I understood that I had a choice to make. I could surrender to whatever ritual they had planned, become a part of this twisted place, or I could step into the unknown, facing whatever horror lurked in that swirling void. With one last look at the grotesque faces of my would-be captors, I made my choice. I stepped forward, letting the darkness envelop me. I'd like to say that I escaped, that I found my way back to my normal life, but the truth is, I'm not sure where I am or what I've become. Sometimes I catch glimpses of other places, other realities, and sometimes, in quiet moments, I can still hear the chanting. All I know for certain is this: be careful where you choose to stay. Some inns cater to more than just weary travelers, and some vacations can last an eternity. The first thing I noticed when I entered my new apartment was the silence. Not the peaceful quiet of a well-insulated building, but an oppressive stillness that seemed to swallow every sound. My footsteps, usually echoing on hardwood floors, were muffled, as if I were walking on cotton. Even the thud of my suitcase hitting the ground was oddly muted. I'd been thrilled to find this place, a spacious one-bedroom in the heart of the city for a price that seemed too good to be true. As I stood in the entryway, a chill running down my spine, despite the summer heat outside, I began to wonder if it was. "Get a grip, Sarah," I muttered to myself, my voice sounding strange in the quiet. "It's just an apartment." I began to unpack, trying to shake off the unease that had settled over me. The previous tenant had left some furniture behind, a battered couch, a rickety dining table, and a large antique mirror that dominated one wall of the living room. As I passed by it, I could have sworn I saw something move in its reflection, just at the edge of my vision, but when I turned to look, there was nothing. That night, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional creak of settling wood that seemed far too loud in the stillness around. Around 3 a.m., I heard it. A soft tapping, like fingernails on glass. It seemed to be coming from the living room. Heart pounding, I crept out of bed. The tapping grew louder as I approached the living room. In the dim light filtering through the curtains, I could see the source. The mirror. Something was moving inside it, a dark shape that didn't match my reflection. I froze, unable to look away as the shape grew more distinct. It was a face, gaunt and pale, with eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness. A hand pressed against the glass from the other side, long fingers spade as if trying to push through. I screamed, the sound shockingly loud in the quiet apartment. The face in the mirror twisted into a grotesque smile, and then vanished as quickly as it had appeared. I spent the rest of the night huddled in my bed, lights blazing, too terrified to sleep. When dawn finally broke, I convinced myself it had been a nightmare, a product of stress and an overactive imagination. But as the days passed, strange occurrences became impossible to ignore. Objects would move when I wasn't looking, always just slightly out of place. The tapping would come at night, sometimes from the mirror, sometimes from the walls or the windows, and always there was that oppressive silence, as if the very air was holding its breath. I tried to leave, to break my lease and find somewhere else to live, but every time I made plans to move out, something would go wrong. My car would break down, my bank account would mysteriously empty, potential new apartments would fall through at the last minute. It was as if the building itself was conspiring to keep me there. A week turned into a month, and I found myself growing accustomed to the strangeness. I avoided looking directly at the mirror, ignored the tapping at night, pretended not to notice when things weren't quite where I had left them. I told myself I was adapting, but deep down I knew I was slowly losing my grip on reality. It was on a Tuesday night that everything changed. I was cooking dinner, chopping vegetables with perhaps more force than necessary, when I cut my finger. A drop of blood fell to the floor, and the apartment seemed to shudder. The silence, and ever present, suddenly broke. A low hum filled the air, growing louder by the second. The lights flickered, and I could hear whispers coming from every corner of the room. I ran to the living room, drawn by an urge I couldn't explain. The mirror was vibrating, its surface rippling like water, and in its depths I could see them. Dozens of faces, all pale and gaunt, all wearing the same desperate expression. "Help us," they whispered, their voices a cacophony of pleading. "Free us!" I stumbled backward, my mind reeling. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice shaking. "What do you want from me?" The woman's face pushed forward, becoming clearer than the rest. It was a woman, her eyes sunken and sad. "We are the ones who came before," she said.
trapped by the hunger of this place. It feeds on us, on our fear and despair. But you can end this. I shook my head, backing away. I don't understand. How can you help me? The woman's expression turned urgent. The blood, she said, your blood, is the key. Willingly given, it can break the spell. Please help us. Before I could respond, the mirror went still, the faces fading away. The apartment fell silent once more, but it felt different now. Expectant, as if waiting for my decision. I spent the next few days in a daze, torn between disbelief and a growing certainty that what I had seen was real. I researched the history of the building, discovering a pattern of disappearances and strange occurrences stretching back decades. Previous tenants who had vanished, leaving behind all their belongings, reports of odd noises and moving shadows. As I dug deeper, I found mentions of an old ritual, something about blood freely given under a full moon. The details were vague, but it all seemed to point to the mirror in my living room. The next full moon was in 3 days. I knew I had a choice to make. I could leave, abandon this cursed apartment, and try to forget everything I had seen, or I could stay and try to help the trapped souls I'd glimpsed in the mirror. When the night of the full moon arrived, I stood before the mirror, a small knife in my hand. The apartment was alive with energy, the air thick with anticipation as the moonlight streamed through the window, casting an ethereal glow on the mirror surface. I took a deep breath and made my choice. I pressed the knife to my palm, wincing as it bit into my skin. A line of red welled up, and I held my hand out to the mirror. I give this freely, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, to break the spell and set you free. The moment my blood touched the glass, everything changed. The mirror's surface rippled and swirled, and I could hear a sound like shattering glass, though the mirror remained intact. The room filled with a blinding light, and I could feel a rush of wind, carrying with it the whispers of
the souls of its tenants and feeding off their energy. My blood, willingly given, had broken the spell. I thought about moving out, about leaving behind the memories of those terrifying months, but in the end, I decided to stay. This apartment, once a prison, now felt like home, and sometimes, when the light hits the mirror just right, I catch a glimpse of smiling faces, the ones I set free, thanking me for breaking their chains. As I write this, I can't help but wonder how many other buildings out there are hiding dark secrets. How many cursed spaces are waiting for someone to break their spell? I may never know the answer, but I do know this: I'll never take silence for granted again. Sometimes the quietest places hide the loudest secrets. The neon sign of the 24-hour diner flickered weakly in the pre-dawn darkness, a beacon of artificial light in an otherwise desolate stretch of highway. I pushed open the glass door, the bell above it chiming softly, announcing my arrival to the near-empty establishment. It was my 3rd night shift this week at the round-the-clock cafe, and already the place was starting to feel more familiar than my own apartment. As I tied my apron around my waist, I noticed them again. The regulars, always the same 5 people, always at the same table in the far corner. They were there every night I worked, from open to close, nursing cups of coffee that never seemed to empty. There was something off about them, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Maybe it was the way they never seemed to eat, or how their hushed conversations would abruptly stop whenever I approached their table. Or perhaps it was their eyes, always watching, always following my every move with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "Hey, Sarah," my coworker Jake called from behind the counter. "You're just in time for the graveyard special." I forced a smile, trying to shake off the unease that had settled over me. "Great, let me guess. More burnt coffee and stale donuts?" Jake chuckled, but it sounded hollow in the quiet diner. "You know it. Hey, have you noticed anything weird about those guys?" He nodded towards the corner table. I hesitated, relief flooding through me at the realization that I wasn't the only one who felt it. "Yeah, actually. They're here every night, aren't they?" Jake leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Not just every night. They never leave." I asked Marge about it. She works the day shift, says she's never seen them come or go. They're just always here. A chill ran down my spine. That's impossible. The diner closes for cleaning every Sunday morning. They can't just— The bell above the door chimed, cutting me off. A truck driver walked in, rubbing his blurry eyes. Jake straightened up, plastering on his customer service smile. "We'll talk later," he muttered. As the night wore on, I found my gaze continually drawn to the corner table. The regulars sat in eerie stillness, their coffee cups perpetually full, despite never being refilled. Once, I could have sworn I saw one of them, a gaunt man with deep-set eyes, flicker like a faulty hologram. But when I blinked, he was solid again. Around 3 a.m., the diner emptied out, leaving just me, Jake, and the regulars. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the soft hum of the fluorescent lights and the occasional clink of a coffee cup being set down. "I'm going to take out the trash," Jake announced, his voice unnaturally loud in the quiet diner. I nodded, grateful for the chance to be alone with my thoughts. As soon as the back door swung shut behind Jake, one of the regulars stood up. It was a woman, her hair a shock of white against pale skin. She moved towards the counter with an unnatural grace, her feet seeming to glide across the linoleum floor. "Sarah," she said, her voice a dry whisper that somehow carried across the room, "we need to talk." I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. How did she know my name? I never wore a name tag. I'm sorry, but I don't— "You've noticed us," she interrupted, now standing directly in front of me. This close, I could see that her eyes were completely black, no whites or irises visible. "You felt it, haven't you? The wrongness of this place." I swallowed hard, unable to look away from those bottomless eyes. "What are you talking about? Who are you people?" She smiled, revealing teeth that were just a bit too sharp to be human. "We are the Watchers, the Guardians, and you, Sarah, have been chosen." Before I could respond, the lights flickered violently. In that moment of darkness, I felt a cold hand grasp my wrist. When the lights stabilized, I found myself standing in the middle of the diner, surrounded by the 5 regulars. Jake was nowhere to be seen. "What's happening?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Where's Jake?" The gaunt man I'd seen flicker earlier stepped forward. "Jake is no longer with us. He served his purpose." A wave of nausea washed over me as implications of his words sank in. "You killed him?" The white-haired woman shook her head. "Not killed, transformed, as you will be." They began to chant in a language I didn't recognize. Their voices blended into a discordant harmony that made my head spin. The diner around us began to warp and twist, the walls melting away to reveal a vast, starry void. "We are the guardians of the threshold," the woman explained, her voice echoing strangely in the impossible space. "This diner sits at the crossroads of realities. We keep the balance, prevent the worlds from bleeding into each other. But our time is ending. We need a replacement." I shook my head, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. "Why me? I'm nobody special. I'm just a waitress." The gaunt man laughed, a sound like grinding glass. "You were drawn here for a reason, Sarah. You can feel the thinness of reality in this place. You have the potential to see beyond the veil." As he spoke, I began to see it. Glimpses of other worlds, superimposed over our own. Creatures of impossible geometry drifting through the void. The true nature of the diner. A nexus point where countless realities intersected. "No," I whispered, squeezing my eyes shut. "This isn't real. It can't be." "Oh, but it is," the woman said, her voice almost gentle. "And now you have a choice to make. Join us, take your place as a guardian, or—" She left the alternative unspoken, but I could feel the threat hanging in the air. I thought of Jake, of his mysterious disappearance, of all the other employees who had come and gone over the years, never to be seen again. "What happens if I say no?" I asked, already knowing the answer. The regulars exchanged glances, their black eyes glittering in the starlight. "Then we find someone else, and you, well, let's just say you won't be working the night shift anymore." I took a deep breath, weighing my options. On one hand, everything I knew about reality had just been shattered. The idea of becoming some interdimensional guardian was terrifying, but on the other hand, the alternative seemed far worse. "If I agree," I said slowly, "what exactly would I be doing?" The woman smiled, seeming pleased by my question. "You would join us in our vigil, watch for signs of incursion from other realities, maintain the balance, and occasionally guide lost souls back to where they belong." As she spoke, I saw flashes of what my life could become, endless nights in the diner, watching the ebb and flow of realities, the power to peer into other worlds, to shape the very fabric of existence. It was overwhelming, but also strangely enticing. "Okay," I heard myself say, as if from a great distance. "I'll do it." The chanting resumed, louder this time. I felt a strange energy coursing through my body, rewriting my very essence. My vision blurred, and for a moment I could see everything, every possible reality, every potential future. When it was over, I found myself back in the diner. Everything looked the same and yet different. I could see the thin spots now, the places where realities bled into each other, and I understood my role in keeping them separate. The regulars, my new companions, nodded approvingly. "Welcome, Sarah," she said. "Take your seat. Our vigil continues." As I sat down at the corner table, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window. My eyes were black now, like theirs. I was no longer just Sarah the waitress. I was a guardian of reality, a watcher at the crossroads. The bell above the door chimed, and a tired-looking man walked in. I smiled, knowing that to him I was just another late-night customer, but I could see the truth. Now, I could see everything. And as I settled in for my eternal shift at the round-the-clock cafe, I couldn't help but wonder how many other seemingly ordinary places held secrets like this. How thin is the veil between worlds, really? But those were questions for another time. For now, I had a job to do, a reality to protect, and an endless supply of coffee to drink. The first red flag should have been the rent. $500 a month for a spacious room in a Victorian house, utilities included, in the heart of Boston. It was too good to be true, but I was a broke college student, desperate for a place to live, and Mr. Blackwood's kind smile and grandfatherly demeanor had won me over instantly. "Welcome home, Alice," he'd said, handing me the old brass key. "I'm sure you will be very happy here." Now,
3 months later, as I lay in my bed, listening to the sounds of footsteps pacing in the room above, a room I knew to be empty, I realized just how wrong I'd been. It started small, things going missing only to reappear in odd places. The sensation of being watched when I was alone in my room. Strange scratching noises in the walls at night. I tried to rationalize it. Old houses make noises. I was stressed from exams and imagining things. But as the weeks went by, the incidents became harder to explain away. One night, I came home late from a study session to find all the furniture in my room rearranged. The heavy oak dresser that I could barely budge was now on the opposite wall. When I confronted Mr. Blackwood about it the next day, he just smiled that grandfatherly smile and said, "Oh my, you must have been very tired last night to not remember doing that yourself." But I knew I hadn't touched anything, just as I knew I hadn't written the strange symbols that began appearing on my mirror in the mornings, drawn in what looked disturbingly like dried blood. The other tenants were no help. They were all older, reclusive types who rarely left their rooms. On the rare occasions I ran into one in the hallway, they would avert their eyes and hurry past as if afraid to be caught talking to me. It was Mara, the girl who lived in the room next to mine, who finally confirmed I wasn't going crazy. "You've noticed it too, haven't you?" she whispered one day as we passed on the stairs. Her eyes were wide, darting nervously towards Mr. Blackwood's closed office door. "The wrongness of this place." I nodded, relief flooding through me at the realization that I wasn't alone in my fears. "What's going on here, Mara? What is this place?" She shook her head, her voice dropping even lower. "I don't know exactly, but I've been doing some research. This house, it has a history. People have been disappearing from here for decades, and Mr. Blackwood, he's been the landlord for far longer than should be possible." A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean?" "I found newspaper clippings from the 1950s mentioning him by name. He looked exactly the same then as he does now." Before I could respond, we heard the creak of Mr. Blackwood's office door opening. Mara's eyes widened in panic. "Be careful, Alice," she hissed before darting up the stairs. That night, as I lay in bed, trying to process what Mara had told me, I heard it. A soft tapping on my door. Tap, tap, tap. Slow and deliberate. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice shaking. No answer, just more tapping. Tap, tap, tap. I got up, my heart pounding, and approached the door. Through the keyhole, I could see a shadow moving in the hallway. A tall, hunched figure that didn't look quite human. The tapping stopped, then slowly an eye appeared at the keyhole. It wasn't Mr. Blackwood's kind blue eye. This was yellow, with a slitted pupil, like a cat's. It blinked once, and I stumbled back with a scream. The door burst open, and Mr. Blackwood rushed in, looking concerned. "Alice, dear, what's wrong? I heard you cry out." I looked from him to the open door, confused and terrified. There was something out there, and I saw it. He patted my hand soothingly. "Oh my, you must have been having a nightmare. There's nothing out there, see?" He gestured to the empty hallway. But as he turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of something yellow gleaming in his eyes, just for a second, before they were back to their usual blue. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. I spent my time researching the house's history, confirming everything Mara had told me, and uncovering even more disturbing details. The house had been built in the 1800s by a man rumored to be involved in occult practices. Over the years, dozens of tenants had vanished without a trace. And Mr. Blackwood? The more I looked, the more I found references to him throughout the decades, always the same name, always the same grandfatherly appearance. It was impossible. Unless I decided to confront him. I couldn't live like this anymore, jumping at every shadow, doubting my own sanity. I marched down to his office, my hand raised to knock, when I heard voices from inside. "The girl is becoming troublesome," Mr. Blackwood was saying. "She's asking too many questions." "Then perhaps it's time," replied a voice I didn't recognize. It was deep and growly, with an odd echoing quality. "The stars are almost aligned. We need fresh blood for the ritual." I gasped, then clapped my hand over my mouth, but it was too late. The voices inside went silent, then footsteps approaching the door. I ran up the stairs, down the hallway, fumbling with my key, as I heard Mr. Blackwood calling my name in that kindly voice that now sent shivers of terror down my spine. I slammed my door shut, locking it and pushing my dresser in front of it for good measure. My mind was racing. Ritual? Fresh blood? I had to get out of here. I began throwing clothes into my backpack, my hands shaking so badly I could barely zip it closed.
That's when I noticed the mirror. The symbols were back, but this time they were moving, rearranging themselves before my eyes. As I watched, horrified and transfixed, they formed words I could understand. Too late. The dresser blocking my door suddenly flew across the room as if thrown by an invisible hand. Mr. Blackwood stood in the doorway, but he didn't look grandfatherly anymore. His eyes were fully yellow now, his smile revealing teeth that were far too sharp. Now, Alice," he said, his voice overlaid with that deep, growly tone I'd heard in his office. "You've been chosen for a great honor." Behind him, I could see the other tenants gathering in the hallway. Their eyes were all glowing yellow, their bodies shifting and changing into forms that were no longer human. I backed up against the wall, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. This couldn't be happening. It had to be a nightmare. But as Mr. Blackwood advanced, his form growing and twisting into something monstrous, I knew this was all too real. In that moment of pure terror, something inside me snapped. A strength I didn't know I possessed surged through me. I grabbed the heavy lamp from my bedside table and swung it with all my might at the window. The glass shattered, and without a second thought, I leaped. We were only on the second floor, but the fall seemed to last an eternity. I hit the ground hard, pain shooting through my ankle, but adrenaline kept me moving. I ran into the night, not daring to look back. Behind me, I could hear inhuman shrieks and the sound of pursuit, but I didn't stop. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs felt like lead. I don't know how long I ran or how far I went. When I finally stopped, gasping for breath, I found myself in a busy part of the city I didn't recognize. The normal sounds of traffic and people felt surreal after what I'd just experienced. I never went back to that house. I reported everything to the police, but of course, they didn't believe me. When they went to investigate, they found the house empty. No sign of Mr. Blackwood or any of the other tenants. Just an abandoned old Victorian with no evidence of the horrors I'd witnessed. Sometimes, late at night, I still wake up in a cold sweat, certain I can hear that soft tapping on my door. Tap, tap, tap. And in my darkest moments, I wonder if I ever really escaped at all, or if this is just another layer of their twisted game. One thing's for certain, I'll never again be tempted by an offer that seems too good to be true, because sometimes the real price is far higher than you could ever imagine.
There, I turned the car towards the glow, praying it wasn't just my imagination. As we got closer, a massive structure loomed out of the storm. It was an old ski lodge, its windows dark, except for a single light burning in what looked like a lobby. "Thank God," Mark breathed as I pulled into the snow-covered parking lot. "Let's hope someone's home." We grabbed our overnight bags and made a run for the entrance, the bitter cold biting at any exposed skin. The front door was unlocked, swinging open with a creak that echoed through the cavernous lobby. "Hello," I called out, stamping the snow from my boots. "Is anyone here?" Silence greeted us. The lobby was dimly lit by a single lamp on the reception desk, casting long shadows across the room. A thick layer of dust covered everything, and the air smelled musty as if the place hadn't been opened in years. "This doesn't look good," Mark muttered, moving closer to me. "Maybe we should try somewhere else." I shook my head. The car's not going to start again in this cold, and we freeze if we try to walk. We don't have a choice. As if to emphasize my point, a particularly violent gust of wind rattled the windows. Mark nodded reluctantly. "I guess you're right, but I don't like this, Sarah. Something feels off." I couldn't argue with that. The entire lodge had an eerie, abandoned feel to it, but it was shelter from the storm, and right now that was all that mattered. We made our way to the reception desk, hoping to find some clue about the lodge's current status. The guest book was open, its last entry dated over 5 years ago. A thin film of dust covered the pen lying next to it. "I don't think anyone's been here for a long time," I said, running my finger through the dust on the desk. Mark was examining a bulletin board on the wall. "Look at this," he called. I joined him, squinting at the faded notices pinned haphazardly to the cork. Most were typical ski lodge announcements, trail maps, weather advisories, lost and found items, but one tucked in the corner caught my eye. It was a newspaper clipping, yellowed with age. The headline read, "Local Legend or Deadly Truth, The Curse of Whispering Pines Lodge." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold as I read the article. It spoke of mysterious disappearances over the years, of guests who checked in but never checked out. The locals blamed it on an old Native American curse, but the authorities had never found any evidence of foul play. "This has to be some kind of joke," Mark said, but his voice lacked conviction. "They probably made it up to drum up business, create a spooky atmosphere for the tourists." I nodded, trying to convince myself he was right, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled over me. We decided to find a room for the night, figuring we'd sort everything about in the morning, when the storm had passed. The key rack behind the desk was full, so we picked one at random and headed up the grand staircase to the second floor. The room was basic but clean, with 2 twin beds and a small bathroom. It looked like it hadn't been touched since the lodge closed, perfectly preserved like some kind of time capsule. "Well, it's not the Ritz, but it'll do," Mark said, forcing a smile. "Let's get some sleep. Things will look better in the morning." I wasn't so sure about that, but I was exhausted. We settled into our separate beds, the howling wind outside serving as an eerie lullaby. I don't know how long I slept before the noise woke me. At first, I thought it was just the storm, but as I became more alert, I realized it was coming from inside the lodge. Footsteps moving down the hallway outside our room. I sat up, my heart pounding. "Mark," I whispered, "do you hear that?" He stirred, then sat up quickly. "Footsteps, but I thought we were alone here." The steps grew closer, then stopped right outside our door. We held our breath, staring at the doorknob. Slowly, it began to turn. Mark was out of bed in an instant, pressing his weight against the door. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice shaky. No answer, just more turning of the doorknob, more insistent now. I joined Mark at the door, adding my weight to it. "We were armed," I lied, hoping to scare off whoever was out there. "Leave us alone." The pressure on the door suddenly stopped. We listened intently, but could hear nothing but the wind outside. After what felt like an eternity, we heard footsteps again, this time moving away from our door. We stayed there, pressed against the door for several more minutes before daring to move. "What the hell was that?" Mark whispered. I shook my head, too shaken to speak. We spent the rest of the night huddled together on one bed, jumping at every creak and groan of the old building. As the first light of dawn filtered through the curtains, we made a decision. Storm or no storm, we had to get out of there. We packed our bags quickly and quietly, then crept out into the hallway. The lodge looked different in the pale morning light, somehow more sinister. Shadows seemed to move in the corners of our vision, and I could have sworn I heard whispers coming from behind closed doors. We were halfway down the grand staircase when we saw them. Footprints in the dust, leading from the front door and up the stairs. They weren't ours. "Run," Mark said, his voice tight. We bolted down the stairs and out the front door, not daring to look back. The storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape transformed by snow. Our car was buried under a thick white blanket. "Forget the car," I gasped, fumbling for my phone. "We need to call for help." But as I pulled out my phone, I froze. The screen showed the date, 3 days later than it should have been. We'd been in the lodge for 3 days, not one night.
A noise from inside the lodge made us both jump. Without a word, we started running, plowing through the deep snow towards the main road. We were picked up an hour later by a passing snowplow. The driver looked at us strangely when we told him where we'd been. "A Whispering Pines Lodge," he said, frowning. "That place burned down years ago. There's nothing left but ruins." Mark and I exchanged horrified glances. What had we experienced? Where had we really been for those missing days? As we drove away, I looked back one last time. Through the trees, I could just make out the lodge standing tall and imposing against the snow-covered mountains. And in one of the upper windows, I saw a figure watching us leave. I blinked, and it was gone. In its place stood the charred ruins the snowplow driver had described. To this day, I don't know what happened to us at Whispering Pines Lodge, but sometimes on cold winter nights, when the wind howls outside my window, I swear I can hear distant whispers calling me back to that impossible place where time stands still and the dead walk among the living. And I know, with a certainty that chills me to my core, that someday, somehow, I'll find myself back there. Because some places, once they've claimed you, never really let you go. The GPS blinked out just as I turned onto the unmarked dirt road. One moment it was confidently guiding me through the winding back roads of rural Pennsylvania, and the next, nothing. Static filled the screen, then went dark. I tapped it frustratingly, but the device remained stubbornly lifeless. "Great," I muttered, peering through the windshield at the dense forest surrounding me. The late afternoon sun filtered weakly through the trees, casting long shadows across the narrow road. I was already running late for my cousin's wedding, and now this. I considered turning back, but the thought of retracing the last hour of complicated turns was daunting. Surely this road had to lead somewhere. I pressed on, hoping to find a town or at least someone who could point me in the right direction. The trees grew thicker as I drove, their branches forming a canopy that blocked out most of the fading daylight. An uneasy feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. Something about this place felt off. The forest was too quiet, devoid of the usual chirping of birds or rustling of small animals. Just as I was about to give up and turn around, the trees suddenly parted, revealing a small town nestled in a clearing. Relief washed over me as I pulled onto the main street, lined with quaint storefronts that looked like they belonged in another century.
Few people milled about on the sidewalks, all dressed in oddly old-fashioned clothing. They turned to stare as I drove past, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and, was that fear? I parked in front of what looked like a general store and stepped out of the car, stretching my legs. The air felt different here, heavier somehow, with a faint metallic tang that made me wrinkle my nose. "Excuse me," I called out to an elderly man sweeping the storefront. "Could you tell me where I am? My GPS stopped working and I'm a bit lost." The man froze, his broom clattering to the ground. He stared at me with wide, frightened eyes before hurrying inside the store, slamming the door behind him. Bewildered, I turned to see a small group of townspeople had gathered, watching me intently. Their gazes made my skin crawl. A woman stepped forward, her long skirt swishing against the dusty road. "Welcome to Millbrook," she said, her voice carrying a strange accent I couldn't place. "We don't get many visitors here." "I can see that," I replied, trying to keep my tone light despite the growing sense of unease. "I'm just passing through. Could you point me towards the highway? I'm trying to get to Pittsburgh." The woman's brow furrowed. "Pittsburgh? I'm afraid I don't know of such a place. But you're welcome to stay here in Millbrook. We always have room for one more." Alarm bells were ringing in my head now. How could she not know Pittsburgh? And the way she said, "always have room for one more," it sent a chill down my spine. "That's very kind," I said, backing towards my car, "but I really should be going. My family's expecting me."
As I reached for the door handle, I felt a hand on my arm. A man had appeared beside me, his grip unnaturally strong. Now, he said, his smile not reaching his eyes. There's no need to rush off. Why don't you join us for dinner? We're always eager to hear news from the outside world. I tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. Please, I said, my voice shaking, I need to leave. The crowd had grown larger now, pressing in around me. Their faces were a mix of hunger and anticipation, like predators cornering their prey. Panic surged through me. I wrenched my arm free and dove into my car, fumbling with the keys. The engine roared to life, and I slammed it into reverse, tires squealing as I backed away from the advancing crowd. I spun the car around and floored it, racing back the way I'd come. In my rearview mirror, I could see the townspeople flooding into the street, their faces twisted with rage. The forest seemed to close in around me as I sped down the dirt road, branches scraping against the sides of my car. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. What the hell had just happened? I drove for what felt like hours, the scenery never changing, the same trees, the same bends in the road. It was as if I was driving in circles. Darkness had fallen completely now, and my headlights barely penetrated the thick fog that had rolled in. Just as despair was starting to set in, I saw lights ahead. Civilization. I pressed the gas harder, eager to put as much distance between me and Millbrook as possible. As I burst out of the tree line, I slammed on the brakes, my car skidding to a stop. There, in front of me, was Millbrook. The exact same main street, the exact same buildings. It was impossible. I'd been driving away from the town, hadn't I? The townspeople were there waiting. Their eyes glowed in the darkness, reflecting my headlights like animals caught in the spotlight. I threw the car into reverse, but the engine sputtered and died. No matter how many times I turned the key, it wouldn't start. The woman who had greeted me earlier approached my car, that same eerie smile on her face. "You see," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the closed windows, "Millbrook always has room for one more, and once you're here, you can never leave." Tears of frustration and fear streamed down my face as I continued to try to start the car. This couldn't be happening. It had to be a nightmare. A tap on my window made me jump. The man who had grabbed me earlier was there, his face pressed against the glass. "Come now," he said, his voice muffled but still audible. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Accept your new home." I shook my head violently, pressing the lock button even though I knew it was futile. They began to rock the car, their inhuman strength evident as my vehicle swayed back and forth. In desperation, I grabbed my phone. Still no signal, but maybe. I pulled up the map app, praying for a miracle. To my shock, it opened, showing my location, but what I saw made my blood run cold. According to the map, I was in the middle of nowhere. No roads, no towns for miles. Just an empty patch of forest where Millbrook now stood. A crack appeared in my windshield as the townspeople's assault on my car intensified. I knew it was only time before they broke through. That's when I saw it. A faint shimmer in the air just at the edge of town. It looked like heat waves rising from hot asphalt, but in the cool night air, that was impossible. Without thinking, I grabbed my bag and flung open the car door, catching my attackers by surprise. I ran, pushing past grasping hands and angry shouts. My lungs burned as I sprinted towards that strange shimmer, praying it was some kind of way out. The air grew thick as I approached, like running through water. Behind me, I could hear the townsfolk in pursuit, their voices distorted and alien. With one last burst of energy, I threw myself at the shimmer. There was a moment of resistance, like pushing through a rubber membrane, and then I was falling, tumbling down a steep embankment. I hit the ground hard, the breath knocked out of me. As I lay there gasping, I heard a sound that made me want to cry with relief. Traffic! Struggling to my feet, I saw I was on the side of a highway.
My clothes were torn and dirty, and I was covered in scratches from my fall, but I was alive, and more importantly, I was free. A car pulled over, the driver leaning out with a concerned expression. "Are you okay, miss? Do you need help?" I nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. As I climbed into his car, I glanced back at the forest I'd emerged from. For a moment, I thought I saw faces watching me from between the trees, but when I blinked, they were gone. The driver, a kind-faced older man, listened patiently as I recounted my experience, leaving out the more unbelievable parts. He assumed I had gotten lost in the woods and been wandering for hours. I didn't correct him. As we drove towards Pittsburgh, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd narrowly escaped something terrible. I kept expecting to see Millbrook appear around every bend, its inhabitants waiting to reclaim me. Even now, years later, I avoid back roads and small towns. I keep my GPS updated and always tell someone where I'm going, because I know that, somewhere out there, hidden from the modern world, Millbrook is waiting. And it always has room for one more. The mop hit the floor with a wet slap, echoing through the empty hallways of Pinnacle Industries at 2 a.m. The sprawling office complex was a different world. No bustling executives, no clicking heels, just me and the endless stretch of polished floors. I'd been working the night shift as a janitor for 6 months, and the solitude had become almost comforting. Almost. Tonight, though, something felt off. The air was thick with tension, like the calm before a storm. I shook my head, trying to dispel the unease. "Get it together, Mike," I muttered.
Myself. It's just another night. I wheeled my cart down the corridor, the squeaky wheel a familiar companion in the silence. As I approached the executive suites on the top floor, I noticed a sliver of light spilling from beneath a door. Odd. The bigwigs never worked this late. Curiosity got the better of me. I inched closer, straining to hear any sound from within. Muffled voices drifted through the door, urgent and agitated. "We need to move the shipment tonight," a man's voice hissed. "The feds are closing in." My blood ran cold. Feds? Shipments? This wasn't your typical late-night business meeting. "What about the night janitor?" a woman responded, her tone sharp with worry. I froze, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure they could hear it through the door. "Leave him to me," the man replied, his voice chilling in its casualness. "No loose ends." The unmistakable sound of a gun being cocked sent me stumbling backward. I had to get out of there, fast. I abandoned my cart and ran for the stairs, not daring to wait for the elevator. As I burst through the stairwell door, I heard shouts behind me. They knew I was here. Taking the stairs 3 at a time, I flew down flight after flight, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The sound of heavy footsteps and angry voices echoed above me, growing closer with each passing second. I exploded out of the stairwell on the ground floor, sprinting across the lobby towards the main entrance. My hand had just touched the door when a bullet whizzed past my ear, shattering the glass. Instinct took over. I dove behind a large potted plant, my mind racing. The front door was out. I needed another way out. My eyes landed on the service entrance across the lobby. It was a long shot, but it was my only chance. Taking a deep breath, I made a break for it. Bullets peppered the floor around me as I zigzagged across the open space. I slammed into the service door, fumbling with my key ring. "Come on, come on!" The lock clicked open just as a hand grabbed my shoulder, spinning me around. I found myself face to face with a man in an expensive suit, his eyes cold and deadly. "End of the line. A janitor," he sneered, raising his gun. In that moment, time seemed to slow down. I saw his finger tighten on the trigger. Saw the barrel aimed squarely at my chest. But I also saw something else.
a fire extinguisher mounted on the wall beside me. Without thinking, I grabbed it and swung with all my might. The heavy canister connected with the man's head with a sickening crunch. He crumpled to the floor, his gun clattering away. I didn't wait to see if he'd get up. I burst through the service entrance and ran into the night, my feet pounding the pavement as I put as much distance between myself and Pinnacle Industries as possible. Hours later, huddled in a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of town, I tried to make sense of what had happened. My hand shook as I clutched a cup of coffee, my mind replaying the night's events on a loop. What had I stumbled into? Drug trafficking? Money laundering? Whatever it was big enough to kill for. And now they knew my face. I knew I should go to the police, but would they believe enough janitor over the word of powerful executives? And even if they did, could they protect me?
And its stellar reviews. Now, as the sun set and shadows crept across the room, I was beginning to regret my choice. Sleep came fitfully that night. Strange noises kept waking me, scratching sounds from inside the walls, whispers that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Each time I jolted awake, heart racing, the room seemed different. Furniture slightly out of place, shadows that didn't quite match the objects casting them. By morning, I was exhausted and on edge. But in the harsh light of day, my fears seemed silly. Old hotels made noises. Housekeeping probably moved things while cleaning. There had to be logical explanations. The conference was as mind-numbing as expected, but I welcomed the distraction. It wasn't until I returned to my room that evening that the strangeness resumed. The moment I opened the door, I knew someone or something had been there. Nothing was obviously disturbed, but the air felt different, charged somehow. And there, on the pristine white duvet, lay a single red rose. My blood ran cold. I hadn't ordered room service. I hadn't told anyone my room number. I snatched up the phone to call the front desk, but the line was dead. Static filled my cell phone when I tried to use it instead. That's when I noticed the mirror. My reflection stared back at me, but something was wrong. It didn't match my movements exactly. There was a lag, almost imperceptible, but definitely there. And its eyes, they seemed to glow with an inner light that wasn't my own. I backed away, my heart pounding. This was impossible. I had to be hallucinating, overtired, and imagining things. I splashed cold water on my face, took deep breaths, tried to calm myself. When I looked back at the mirror, my reflection was normal. But now,
The room behind me was different, older somehow. The modern furnishings were replaced by antiques. Gaslight flickered on the walls, and there, seated at a vanity that hadn't been there before, was a woman. She turned to face me, her pale face framed by elaborately styled dark hair. Her dress was from another century, all lace and corsets. But it was her eyes that captivated me. Deep, dark, and utterly unhuman. "There you are," she said, her voice echoing strangely. "We've been so lonely without you." I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I lunged for the door, but my hands passed right through the knob. The woman laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Oh, darling," she said, standing and gliding towards me. "You don't remember. You checked in long ago, 1898 to be precise. You can never leave. None of us can." The room spun around me. Glimpses of other times, other versions of this same room flashed before my eyes. I saw myself dressed in clothes from every decade of the past century, living and dying in this room over and over again. I remembered now. The curse, the deal I'd made with something old and patient and hungry. I'd been trapped here for over 100 years, reliving the same week over and over. My memories wiped clean each time, only to be restored at the end. The woman, my wife, my jailer, both reached for me, her cold hands cupping my face. "It's time to start again, my love. Shall we?" The room blurred and shifted. I felt myself fading, my memories slipping away like sand through an hourglass. The last thing I saw before darkness took me was the woman's smile, cruel and beautiful. I blinked, disoriented. I was standing in the hallway of the Majestic Hotel, my suitcase beside me. I must have zoned out for a moment. Shaking my head to clear it, I slid my keycard into the lock of room 1408. The light flashed green, and I pushed open the door. As I stepped inside, a chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Everything looked perfect, but something felt off. I shook my head, chiding myself for being paranoid. It had been a long day of travel, and I was tired. A good night's sleep was all I needed. As I unpacked, I noticed small oddities. The TV remote was on the left side of the bed, though I distinctly remember putting it on the right when I first came in. A glass I was sure I'd left on the desk was now on the nightstand. Little things, easy to dismiss, but unsettling. I was here on business, a week-long conference that promised to be as dull as it was necessary. I'd chosen the Majestic for its proximity to the convention center and its stellar reviews. Now, as the sun set and shadows crept across the room, I was beginning to regret my choice. In the corner of my eye, I caught a flicker of movement in the mirror. But when I turned to look, there was nothing there but my own reflection, tired and wary. For a moment, just a moment, I thought I saw something else in those familiar eyes. Something old and patient and hungry. I blinked, and it was gone. Just my imagination, I told myself. Just another night in another hotel room. But as I turned away from the mirror, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd done this all before, that I would do it all again. And somewhere, in a place I couldn't quite reach, I heard the echo of a woman's laughter, like the sound of breaking glass. What's to come? I tried to fight the encroaching darkness, but it was a losing battle. The last thing I saw before consciousness took me was my own reflection in one of the mirrors, but it wasn't me, not really. The face looking back was older, gaunt, with eyes that held a lifetime of terror. I woke with a start, my head pounding. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was or how I'd gotten there. Then it all came flooding back. The hike, getting lost, the strange cabin, the old woman, the tea. I sat up, realizing I was on a narrow cot in a corner of the cabin. Sunlight streamed through the windows, dust motes dancing in the beams. The old woman was nowhere to be seen. I stood on shaky legs, my body feeling oddly stiff, as if I'd slept for far longer than one night. I made my way to the door, desperate to leave this place and find my way back to civilization. But when I stepped outside, my heart nearly stopped. The forest was wrong. The trees were taller, older, their branches twisted into unnatural shapes. The very air felt different, heavier somehow, charged with an energy I couldn't explain. I spun around, intending to grab my backpack and run, only to freeze in shock. The cabin was gone. In its place stood a circle of standing stones, ancient and weathered, covered in strange symbols that seemed to writhe and move when I wasn't looking directly at them. "No," I whispered, backing away. "This isn't possible." "Oh, but it is," came a familiar, raspy voice. The old woman stepped out from behind one of the stones, but she wasn't old anymore. She was ageless, her form shifting and changing as I watched, never settling on one appearance for more than a moment. "What have you done to me?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "Where am I?" She laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "You're exactly where you were before, my dear, just a little further along." "I don't understand," I said, panic rising in my throat. "Time is a funny thing," she said, circling me slowly. "So rigid for most, but so very fluid for some. You've taken a little trip, that's all. About, 50 years or so into the future." I shook my head, refusing to believe it. "That's impossible. You're insane. I need to leave, to get home." Her eyes flashed suddenly, cold and hard. "Home? Oh, my sweet summer child, this is your home now, just as it has been for the past 5 decades. As she spoke, memories began to flood my mind. Memories of years spent in that cabin, of countless hikers lured in, of rituals performed in this very stone circle, memories of learning secrets no human was meant to know, of extending my own life at the cost of others. I saw my reflection in a pool of water at my feet, and a strangled cry escaped my lips. The face looking back at me was my own, but aged, worn, with eyes that held the weight of unspeakable things. "No," I whispered, falling to my knees. "This can't be real. I'm not you. I would never, ever." But even as I denied it, I knew it was true. Somehow, impossibly, I had become the very thing that had trapped me. I was the old woman in the cabin, luring in lost hikers, perpetuating a cycle that had no end. "Don't fight it," my older self said, her voice almost gentle now. "It gets easier in time, and we have all the time in the world." As the sun set over the twisted forest, I felt the last vestiges of my old self slipping away. The circle of stones hummed with power, and I knew that soon another lost hiker would stumble upon a cabin in the woods, seeking help from a strange old woman, and the cycle would begin anew. In that moment, standing in a future I never wanted, I realized the true horror of my situation. I wasn't just lost in the woods, I was lost in time, trapped in an endless loop of my own making. And as the stars came out, ancient and uncaring, I understood that my hike had ended long ago. This was my trail now, winding endlessly through the dark woods of eternity. The neon sign of the gas station flickered weakly in the midnight gloom, a lone beacon on the desolate stretch of highway. I pulled my beat-up Chevy into the lot, the engine sputtering ominously. The fuel gauge had been hovering on empty for the last 10 miles, and I silently thanked whatever deity was listening that I'd made it this far.
As I stepped out of the car, a gust of wind whipped across the empty parking lot, carrying with it the scent of rain and something else, something I couldn't quite place. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I shivered, though not entirely from the cold. The station looked like it had seen better days. Paint peeled from the walls, and half the lights in the convenience store were out. But beggars can't be choosers. And right now, I was definitely begging. I needed gas, and I needed it now. I approached the pump, credit card in hand, when I noticed the faded sign taped to it. Cash only. Great. Just great. With a sigh, I turned towards the store. As I reached for the door handle, I caught my reflection in the grimy glass. I looked as rough as I felt. 3 days of stubble, dark circles under my eyes, clothes rumpled from too many hours on the road. This cross-country trip was supposed to be a fresh start, a chance to leave behind the mess my life had become. But standing here in the middle of nowhere, I felt more lost than ever. The bell above the door jangled discordantly as I entered. The interior was dimly lit and smelled of stale cigarettes and something vaguely metallic. Behind the counter stood an old man, his face deeply lined, his eyes hidden behind thick glasses that reflected the flickering fluorescent lights. "Evening," I said, approaching the counter. "Fill up on pump 3, please." The old man didn't respond, didn't even look at me. He just stood there, staring at something behind me. I turned, half expecting to see another customer, but the store was empty. Excuse me," I tried again. "I need to pay for some gas." Slowly, so slowly, it was almost imperceptible, the old man's head turned towards me. His glasses slipped down his nose, and I found myself looking into eyes that were completely white. No iris, no pupil, just a milky blankness that sent a chill down my spine. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice a dry whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "It's not safe. They're coming." I took an involuntary step back. "What? Who's coming?" "Look, I just need some gas and I'll be on my way." The old man's hand shot out, gnarled fingers grasping my wrist with surprising strength. "Listen," he hissed, "you need to leave, now, before it's too late." A loud bang from outside made us both jump. I spun around to see a group of people emerging from the darkness, approaching the store with slow, deliberate steps. There was something off about their movements, something not quite human. "Oh God," the old man moaned, "they're here. We're too late." My heart was pounding now, adrenaline coursing through my veins. Who are they? What's going on? But the old man was already moving faster than I would have thought possible for someone of his age. He shoved me towards a door marked "Employees Only." "Go," he said, "through there, out the back. Run. Don't stop, don't look back, just run." I hesitated for a split second, torn between fear and confusion. But another bang, louder this time, made the decision for me. I bolted through the door, finding myself in a narrow hallway that led to a back exit. And as I burst out into the night air, I heard glass shattering behind me. Screams, inhuman screams, filled the air. I ran, my lungs burning, my legs pumping furiously. I don't know how long I ran. It could have been minutes or hours. The landscape blurred around me, trees and rocks mere shadows in the darkness. Finally, my body gave out, and I collapsed to the ground, gasping for air. As I lay there trying to catch my breath and make sense of what had happened, I became aware of a sound, a low, pulsing sound that seemed to be coming from everywhere at once. I sat up, looking around wildly. That's when I saw them, lights in the sky, moving in impossible patterns. They were too fast, too agile to be any aircraft I'd ever seen. As I watched, paralyzed with a mixture of awe and terror, one of the lights detached from the group and began to descend. I scrambled to my feet, ready to run again, but found I couldn't move. Some unseen force held me in place as the light grew brighter, brighter, until it was all I could see. And then, darkness. I woke up on the side of the highway, the sun beating down on my face. For a moment I was disoriented, unsure of where I was or how I'd gotten there. Then it all came flooding back. The gas station, the old man, the chase, the lights. I sat up, wincing at the stiffness in my muscles. My clothes were torn and dirty, as if I'd been running through the woods. But that was impossible. The gas station had been in the middle of a barren stretch of highway, nowhere near any forest. I looked around, trying to get my bearings. In the distance,